Hello everybody and welcome or welcome back to the second shelf and to another video in the series but the 1001 books by women or about women that I have to read before I die. If you're new to my channel, this is a project inspired by Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot. I will leave a link to her channel down below, and you've probably heard about all these books called 1001 books you have to read before you die. And Sandy follows the list of, I think, 3 combined books. And I thought this is such a fantastic project, I want to do it too. But when I looked at the books, they were just mainly, 2/3 of them were men and more than half of them were white. And there was very little, fiction from outside the Western sphere. So I made my own list. Exclusively women. I try to include as many translated things from all over the world that I could find. I'm reading exclusively in English, and if you're interested, I will leave a link down below to the Goodreads shelf where you can find the 1001 books, but also shelves read, to be read, and the possibles, because sometimes I come across a book and then I think, might be a possible. And sometimes I read a book that was on the shelf and I find it so horrible that it's getting thrown off. That's the advantage. If you have your own shelf, you can just toss it if you think it's horrible. Each month I try to read at least 4 or 5 books, so that in the end, within a year, I'm aiming, I said 52, but I'm aiming for 60, which still means, given the unread and the read books, that it will take me 10 years. So I had already read, of course, a couple of the books that I included in the list. So it's not that I have to start from 0 with 1001 books, but still, they are about close to 600 still to read. So that means 10 years. Well, we will hope that I will live that long. But anyway, for July and August, the statistics first. So as of August 1st, I have 410 read books. I read 6 books in July, and that's a total of 37 books for the year. And that leaves me with 591 unread books. If those of you who are really, really following, if you look at my previous July, it doesn't really add up. That is because I added an additional book that I had already read to the list and threw off one that I hadn't read. So anyway, the total is 591 unread and 410 read. What did I read in July? There are a couple of books that I have already talked about at length, so I will just mention them, but not really talk about them for long. The first one is this, Scarlet Pimpernel by Hungarian English author Emushka. It's Baroness Orchi on the cover, but her first name is Emushka, published in 1905, and this is a historical novel set in during the French Revolution, and it's about this guy who saves people from France, but it's what really enamored me to this book. It's fast-paced and it's entertaining, and but it's this prototype of the hero in disguise. So you have, Batman or Superman, all these heroes who are living a normal life, and at night or whatever, they turn into the superhero. And this is kind of the template for it. So I thought that was really interesting. I also read Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. This was a gift from Heidi from my reading life. The book was published in 1962, and it talks about poisoning, especially the way with pesticides at that time that was poisoning nature and animals and plants, and it was the last book Rachel Carson published because she died far too young from breast cancer shortly after the book was published. It's a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, highly recommend that. I also talked about this one in my tops and flops. That is Gwendolyn Brooks, Maud Martha, published in 1959, if I remember correctly. No, I don't. 1953. Gwendolyn Brooks, of course, was is most known as a poet. She was the first Black female poet to receive the National Book Award or Pulitzer or something. This is her only novel, very short thing. I read this together with Adam, formerly from Memento Mori, and it's this. It's a story of Maud Martha, starting when she was a little girl, was 7, and then her life until she's in her mid-20s, told in short little fragments or snippets, and the language is so beautiful that wonderful book. Then I also read some translated work, Waiting for Tomorrow by Natasha Apana, translated from the French by Geoffrey Strawn. She is a writer that I knew a little bit about. I read a previous book by her, and she is from Mauritius. Mauritius. I always have difficulty with that, pronouncing that. And this one is set in France, not on Mauritius, but you have a protagonist from that island. You have a couple, two artists with a child who immigrated to southern France, and then you have her new nanny, a young woman who is also from Mauritius, like the female protagonist of the couple. And things go horribly wrong. We will learn, we know that from the start because it opens that the woman is waiting for her husband to come back from prison. It's very sad, a very sad story. I really enjoyed the way we slowly peel away. We know that he was in prison, but we don't really know what happened. And then it's like layers of an onion that are peeled away slowly. And I definitely enjoyed it. I didn't think it was a brilliant book. But if you are interested in this dynamic, relationship dynamics, and it's not a threesome really, but it is kind of, sort of. So you have the couple, and then you have this additional woman, so to speak. And I thought the dynamic was interesting, what happened and how it was told. So I can certainly recommend it, and I'm glad that I read it, even though I wouldn't say it's an absolutely brilliant book. And then finally, I also read in July The Widows of Malaba Hill by Sujata Massey, the first book in the Posthumus Mysteries series set in the 1920s in Bombay. That's what it was still called back then. And our main character is Posthumus Mystery, the only woman in India who has working as a lawyer. Back then in India in the 1920s, early 1920s, women were not allowed to the bar, so they couldn't practice as barristers, so they couldn't represent the client in court. But Perveen got her law degree in Harvard, the first woman, of course, and she practices law in her father's firm. So this is interesting. There is a real life woman it's not modeled on her because she had a different life, but at the end you see Cornelia Sorabji, and she was the real one. and she was admitted to the bar finally in 1923 when the bar in India was open to women. But anyway, so Pervin, this mystery is told in two timelines. We have the actual, I have an itch on my nose, I'm very sorry about that, the actual mystery in 1921, a murder. I'm not going to tell you too much in order not to spoil you if you haven't read it. But the other part of the book, and it's alternating chapters, more or less alternating. Sometimes it's 2 chapters in one timeline and then one in the other. And that goes back 5 years, 1916, 1917. And we learn about Pervin's past and a past relationship and what happened. I didn't find the mystery, the 1921 mystery, that engaging. It was very, very slow. It took like a third of the book until the murder happened. It was, a lot of introduction to the characters and things like that. I really enjoyed the timeline when Pervin was still young. I didn't think the solution of the mystery was such a fantastic, it was a bit clunky in my opinion, but I definitely really enjoyed learning something about 1920s society, Indian society, colonialism, the various groups, but also the position of women. So for that reason, it was certainly worthwhile. But the mystery part, I felt, was not that great. It was entertaining and okay, but it was not that great. Then I had 2 books on my list when I filmed the previous video, and that was the play Cloud 9 and a non-fiction book by Manas, Afghani Women in Exile. And those 2 I haven't read, so I will probably read Cloud 9 in August because it's a play and it's also short, and that suits me for my 30 books in 30 days, the challenge that I'm always doing for myself in August. That also means that I will most likely read more than 4 books in August, because there are a couple of other shorter books on the list that I will probably pick up because of the 30 books in 30 days challenge. But there are 4 books that I absolutely plan on reading, and you see how well that goes with the books in July. 4 books I picked and 2 I didn't read, but I read 4 others. So that's why I never do TBRs, because I just suck at it. But anyway, this one is not that bad because from the 4 books, I have already read one, and that is the biggest chunky book, The Winthrop Woman by Anya, Seton, published in 1958, historical novel about Elizabeth Winthrop, who is one of the born in England to a Puritan family and later immigrating in the mid 17th century to the US for the, what's it called? The Massachusetts Bay Colony. And she was one of the founders of certain cities in Connecticut. So it's mostly a tale in the US and that those first so-called settlers, and I thought that was interesting, but I will wrap this book up, even though I have read it already, when I do the next women video and wrap up the books that I read in August. I started it in July and finished it on the 1st of August, and if you're wondering if that is allowed for my 30 in 30 challenge, yes, 1. I can read or start 1 book in July and finish it in August, but only 1. And this was the one. Also on my list for August is this play, A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry, first published end of the 1950s. She is a black, or was a black playwright, and this is her most famous one. I've seen it in the theater. I've also read it in German, in the German translation, very, very long time ago. And I'm looking forward to reading it finally in English. And it is about this family, a poor family in, I think it's Chicago, but correct me if I'm wrong. The matriarch, the mother, and then a son and a very young daughter. The son is already married and has a son of his own, and how they struggle to find their way. That's the very short version of it. So this, I'm sure I will read this because yes. Another thing that I always include in my 30 books in 30 days in August is poems. So I have 2 poetry collections. It's not that I can read poetry that fast, and you shouldn't. I can't read more than maybe 2 or 3 poems one after the other. But poetry collections tend to be slim, so that always is a good pick. And this one is this beautiful edition of Sappho's Stung with Love, Sappho's poems, Stung with Love, Poems and Fragments, translated from the Greek by Aaron Pochigan. Yes, so it's just what it says, poems by Sappho. Of course, they are included in the 1001 book list, and I'm really looking forward to it. I don't read Greek, unfortunately, otherwise I would have bought the original, because especially with poems, I struggle often with translation. But there's the only way I can read Sappho is in a translation. So I will try the English one. If that doesn't work for me, I will try a German one, maybe compare notes. We'll see. And the last one is also a poetry collection by an American contemporary poet, Mary Oliver, Why I Wake Early. These are new poems, at least that's what it says on the cover, and they were published in 2004. Mary Oliver is the pick for the Book Naturalist Book Club. You're all familiar with that. Heidi from My Reading Life and Doris from All the Books have this book club where we are encouraged to read nature writing, and they pick a book for the whole year. It has already been published on their Instagram, the whole list. They do the list at the beginning of the year, which I really appreciate. But they also do kind of author spotlights once in a while. So then that means for that month you can pick whatever book by a certain author. And for August, it's this author, and I picked this. I've never read Mary Oliver. I know that she's a very famous poet, and that she mainly, her poetry is about nature. And this one is about, each poem about a different animal. So you have the snow geese, you have the marsh hawk, you have the lily. So it's about nature, it's about clouds. One poem is called Clouds. So not only about animals, but about nature. And yeah, I want to read more poetry anyway. I'm bad. I'm just not, I don't know. I'm just not patient enough, maybe, for a lot for poems often. So I'm very happy that Mary Oliver was included in the Book Naturalist Book Club, and I will certainly read this in August. So this is my wrap up, and looking forward for August for my the 1001 women books by women I have to read before I die. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I'm very much looking forward to your comments, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.